Somewhere I read that after 26 years of representational politics, no real improvement has taken place there. The question now is, what poor would one care for if something like that is allowed to happen and continue? But I do feel it for the Prime Minister. I do feel it for her because I can tell you politics is an ungrateful game at times. But yet, Michael Manley at one point wrote in a note to me and said, it can perhaps be the most rewarding of all experiences you will ever have in your life.
Thank you, Mr. Chung. We're moving it around. Mr. Barnes, WAVS 1170 AM every weekday, 12 noon, some days.
Very specific question for you gentlemen, and I request specific answers. Short-term plans for young Jamaicans, whether in the diaspora or outside. Short-term plan going into the election. We hear reports that young people are saying, why should I vote? Long-term plans for young Jamaicans. Jamaicans who, as the young man said earlier, came into countries like this to get an education to go back home. As specifically as you can, talk about some of the plans your various parties have for young people.
Mr. Paulwell.
Training, training, training. Short-term, medium, and long-term. After you've acquired certain skills, we have to unleash the natural entrepreneurial talent that so many Jamaicans have, but they've not been able to exercise due to certain hindrances. We have to revise the way we enable our people to have access to credit. This requirement for collaterals, where poor persons don't own land, don't have things to pledge. We now have to put a value on their ideas, on their business plans, on the intellectual capital that they bring. These are some of the new thinking that we intend to introduce come the 28th of August.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Mr. Chung, long-term plans for the young people.
The long-term plan for the young people in the Jamaica Labour Party's program will include, as you already know, the education, the free education at the levels mentioned by the party. It would also include an extension of programs that the interchange of students from universities here and universities in Jamaica and indeed globally. We're just a little island. In fact, let me correct that because I learned that Jamaica was an island when I came to the United States. I read it, I didn't believe it because no island music can spread all over the globe. But what we do for the young folks, the instilling of national pride and moral values is something that has broken down. When there's a disdain for the values that we used to hold so dear, that has gone, the national pride.
Thank you, Mr. Chung. You mentioned education, and our question from the audience, education in Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago is free up to university. How can we make it free just like those two other countries in Jamaica? What's the plan for that, Mr. Paulwell?
It has to be an objective, but it can't be a wishy-washy objective because we have been hearing about free education, but the JLP has recently clarified that what they mean is not free education, but free tuition. We had a free education system up to 1980. It was changed in the 80s. In fact, I led, when I was a student at the university, a demonstration against the JLP government about that. We have to get back to a system where our people can go to school free of charge. But it cannot happen overnight, or else you're going to be irresponsible. You have to ensure that the resources that you have can match it. What we're saying to Jamaicans this year is that no single student who attends, and we're speaking about the secondary school system now, who attends secondary school will be disallowed if the family cannot afford it, and no questions will be asked. That's the pledge and the commitment we have given.
Mr. Chung, JLP, thoughts on...
I agree with the minister to some extent, but we do, over here in the States, as I have seen, because I've studied here, I know that every dollar I pay in property tax sends the children to school. I know he touched on property tax earlier. But I know that all our children go to school based on the property taxes we pay on the properties we own. That is not an if and or but. Is it worth it? Well, take a look at our cities around here. Take a look at the cities and the towns and the standards of living. Question is it worth it to have an educated people? And the answer is yes. In research, it suggests that countries that have an educated populace outproduce those that don't. The question is, when people speak of poor, is that something like a medal? I think the book I used to read, in fact I still read, I read it this evening. It says poverty is a sin. Our job, this generation, is to make a change in those things.
Couple more questions from the audience here, and some people want to speak publicly or acknowledge which party they're part of, but some people wrote down their questions here. Transportation is the basis of our civilization.
Thanks.
This audience member wants to know, what are your plans to develop or rebuild the system of transportation in Jamaica for the future? What's your vision for transportation in Jamaica?
Well, I think everybody will acknowledge that we've had an improved public transport system in Jamaica over the last 7 or so years, due largely to the government policy of re-establishing and owning and operating a public transport system. For those of you who visit Halfway Tree anytime soon, you're going to see the most modern bus terminal in the entire Caribbean, where our people will be able to not only go to catch their buses, but to do their shopping, to eat, and so on. The government has invested heavily in public transportation, and I think in this area, we cannot be faulted.
Mr. Chung, anything different in terms of your transportation vision for Jamaica that the JLP would do differently?
We're losing sight of the vision. The vision for development is sustainable development. When this bus stop is finished, how many more times are you going to build it? How many years will it take? Can those people send their children to universities or to do the things that they want to do? This is not sustainable development. That is true. This is not sustainable. You cannot build a country by putting up skyscrapers without an educated class to fill them.
Louis Davis, South Florida Gleaner Extra, a member of the media, you had a question. We're moving it around. I'm coming back to you. I promise you. I know you have a question about education, probably. Coming back to you.
It's very nice that we're talking here about the future, but we both know the fact is you're both focused on one thing, the next 30 days. I see this as an issue, and I'd like each of you to comment on what this is. We have on one side of a female prime minister who is very charismatic, but who a lot of people think don't have the capability to run the country. We have an opposition leader who has a serious trust issue and credibility problem. How are the individual parties going to deal with this perception? Because the vote on the 28th or 27th of next month is not going to be about what is going to happen in the future, but who do we trust today?
It's a matter of trust, somebody does say. It's a matter of, get the long lady back her mic. It's a matter of trust. Mr. Paulwell?
It is all about trust.
Okay.
It's all about trust, and that is where I believe that my Prime Minister has certainly the clear advantage, because people know that she cares. People have seen programs that she has put in place when she was Minister of Labour, Social Security and Sport, when she was Minister of Tourism and Sport, geared towards the poor. She's from the poor. She articulates the best of all the politicians in Jamaica about the poor and putting forward effective programs to assist the poor. It is about trust, and people trust Sister P.
Mr. Chung,